So some options under consideration. The big one is to install more moorings. Currently, there are not that many moorings installed versus what we could facilitate there. And the installation of moorings would prevent, hopefully, dropping anchor, which would prevent coral damage. And then assign the moorings. So this is one we met before and talked about it. The Army Corps, we've consulted with them, and structurally, it's very hard to calculate the bearing loads of a mooring when there's multiple boats attached to it. And for safety and user conflict issues, a key element is to limit each mooring to one boat at a time. So that prohibits rafting or daisy chaining, whichever you guys like to call it. This was another ask, is to increase outreach to recreational boaters, to both to educate them that this is an available resource, that the moorings are there, that it's, cool if you would like to experience this, but also to educate them on what the operators have worked so hard to come up with, which is a method that seems to work to facilitate safe interaction with mantas. And that's something we're working on. And then this was another ask, which is that it's getting so crowded, at some point we have to decide that there's too much commercial activity and it has to be limited. And this is something that we've done, that everyone worldwide has had to do at some point whenever you have an iconic marine species like a manta ray or a dolphin or a sea otter. They're so cute and they're so attractive that, it's very compelling and it draws large numbers. So both for local residents and also for visitors, we really have to manage it to say, we want you to have sustainable utilization of this resource, which means that, there has to be some rules and restrictions. The way that I would do this is legal or technical, is in the administrative rules, we have the ability to designate ocean recreation management areas or designate the boundaries of an area and say, within these areas, these rules apply. So that's just basically, that's my framework, the structural framework within which we can have this conversation and decide, okay, these are good regulations, and then I can write them into our boating. So we already talked about this. Live boating. So for those of you who don't know, live boating is utilizing your boat with your engine running in the vicinity of snorkelers, divers in the water. When Sam did the safety study, he visually witnessed several incidents of live boating where, if you recall that photo that Keller showed of everybody at night in the water, people are lit, but also, it's a fraught situation because it's dark. So live boating is an increased risk there because you could be live boating above people who are ascending. You could be close to people who are in the water whose lights aren't working. So at a very minimum, to restrict live boating to a speed of slow, no wake, and possibly, we can talk about this later, to designate campfire areas where live boating is prohibited, so that that operators know, if I'm with my customers in this area, there's not going to be a boat coming through this swath of people. So lighting as a navigational hazard. I'm working with the Coast Guard about that, and they do have some regulations, but also that we would require better lighting for individuals who are out there on stand-up paddle boards, who are out there on kayaks, and that they be lit at all times. Not just lit crossing the channel or, choose when you turn your light on, but that they would be lit so that you would know that you're there. Okay, enforcement. So this is always the issue. Why bother having any rules if we can't enforce the ones we already have? So the big thing too in drafting these rules is how can we make it easily enforceable, both internally amongst the people who are using it, if you can self-report or watch each other and say, hey, these are the rules, they're very clear, you should follow them. And also then externally for Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement, which is our enforcement branch of DLNR. There are 2 individuals from DoCare here today to also address some of these questions. So DoCare has committed to doing more site visits at night, and they have a boat now, and so DoCare on this side of the island has a lot more resources than they previously did, and we're pretty optimistic that we can get more enforcement. Okay, other things I'd like to mention that are interesting that would impact mantas and impact this situation generally is federally there has been a petition to list mantas on the Endangered Species Act. So right now they're doing a finding of fact. It was just brought to my attention. It's in the 4-month period. I don't know all the specifics, but if mantas were listed on the Endangered Species Act, of course, this would change the whole game. So federal law would trump whatever we come up with. But honestly, either way, we should go forward with a good regulatory scheme. And hopefully, if that does come up, we can work with the federal government to accommodate. We'll go back, Jess. I'm not done. Just like, let's get done with this. So state and local. Okay, so locally, the county, as far as I know, I've reached out to the Parks Department, but this is really under boating jurisdiction because it's our offshore waters. And then all of the rules, all the boating rules, regardless of whether we write in an exception, and this is pertinent especially to the operators, whatever the rules are, if you have an emergency, there is always an exception for emergencies. If you need to tie up to a mooring, if you need to tie up to another vessel, if you need to break these rules in the administrative rules, there's always an exception for an emergency. So that comment might come up, oh, you didn't write emergency exceptions into this specific rule. That's because broadly and generally in our administrative rules, in Chapter 256, there are administrative exceptions for research vessels, for enforcement officers, for federal enforcement, and for emergency situations. Okay.